Hello everyone, welcome to the channel, welcome back. Today we're doing a continuation of what seems to be my Jeep series lately between these two Jeeps. I've got some transmission lines that were leaking, so I have some video on that kind of stuff, and then I have right now this 2004 Jeep Liberty Limited, which when you drive it, it would appear that the caliper was locking up because it would pull to the right. It would start shaking. It almost seemed like something was loose. Now I did do this wheel bearing I had replaced, and nothing's loose there. The wheel bearing was replaced probably I don't know, maybe 5-6 months ago, and that's doing good. So I thought maybe those 3 bolts that hold the bearing on maybe came a little loose. That's not the case here, but I do have a new brake line and a new caliper. I already had taken this apart because I had to return the old caliper for a core charge, so I just removed it and crimped the line up there, and we're going to remove that line, replace the rubber hose that connects to the caliper, and we're also going to install the new caliper. So if you have a 2004 3.7 liter engine Jeep Liberty, you might be interested in the video, help save you some money. So let's get involved, let's get started. Okay, so it's important to note too that it got real hot. And that you could feel some resistance. You know, when you're driving a vehicle, it should roll at a nice pace. This had some resistance where it was actually slowing down. And then if you stopped, this area here, the brakes, would make a noise similar to a muffler when it's cooling down. I mean, that's how hot that it had gotten. So we're going to put this new caliper on. I think the other caliper was locking up. It's ready to be replaced. So here's the new caliper here. That's the new caliper, and it does have bigger bolts than the other one had. I don't know, which is kind of better. I thought the other bolts that were on the old one were kind of small, and these are the slide pins here where the caliper is gonna move back and forth. So we're going to put this in there. Alright, so I'm going to put this rotor on first. Then I'm going to get my 2 bolts. There's one on the top, one down here. And I'm going to use this socket. It's a 13/16 socket. And let's see if we can't get this thing on here. Now the rotor is going to go in the center of this, and from the back side, since the threads are on the caliper, we're just going to get it in those holes. And the first one is a little tricky. Just got to line up the hole and get them threads catching on there. So we have that one. We're going to get the bottom. We get the bottom one. I get the threads to catch in there. I think we got it. Now we're going to get our wrench, socket wrench. Go ahead and tighten these 2 down. Now this caliper is from AutoZone. for the 2004 Jeep Liberty. But I have a 2005, so it's pretty much identical of all the brake components, so you can use it. Get this bottom one. You don't have to get too crazy with it. You know, I've been doing brakes my entire life. I've never used a torque wrench on the brakes. You just got to use common sense. Don't over tighten it. But you know it has to be tight, so just make sure it's tight. Alright. I think we're good there. So now the next step is, I just want to turn this. Just kind of look at the rotor, make sure it's not, I mean it looks pretty straight. It's not rubbing on anything. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove this part. This is the bracket obviously, and this is the actual caliper. I'm going to remove this bolt, and this bolt's where the slide pins are, so I can put the pads in. And then we'll work towards, we have back here where the new line, you can see the new rubber line, because a lot of times what happens is right here, which is happening on the old hose, will rust out. Right here where the rubber meets the metal. And we have the block where the fitting, the brake fitting, which is actually in the hood area, on the opposite side of the wheel well here. Well, we'll get to that in a little while. So we're going to put that new hose on as well. So let's move on to the next step. Alright guys, so I'm focusing on the old line. It's the old rubber line that converts to there's a metal portion of it, and then the end there connects to the caliper. Just to point out, you can see the corrosion there where the rubber meets the metal. It's only a matter of time before that'll start leaking. Okay, for this one I'm using a 14mm, and that's not going to be the original bolt size. I actually have one of the old bolts from the old caliper, and it's a smaller, not sure what the size is. I think I have a socket here. It's close to a 12. So, you know, these aftermarket or Dorman or whatever the manufacturer is, use the larger bolt, which I'm okay with that. So I'm just going to remove that bolt. I'm going to remove the lower bolt. A lot of times you don't even have to really remove the lower one. You can put the pads in, and then will go into place that way. You know, maybe I'll do that. These, I can hear there's lubrication in here, which is good. I do have some brake grease, but from the factory these are greased, so I don't have to worry about it. So that's good. So what I'm going to do is there's some clips that go into these areas here. There's 4 of them, and so when the pads go in, usually I'll put a little grease on those, and that's where the pads, it allows them to slide back and forth here within the caliper. When this piston pushes the pads together, then they move. So these need to be clean so your pads can move freely, because a lot of times you'll get issues where your pads stick and they don't move, they don't adjust. You know, when you let off the brakes, your pads should release from the rotor. They should back off so you get smooth turn on here without any rubbing. So I think that what was happening before is this, either this piston is seized up on the old one, and it was causing the caliper to, even when you hit the brake, it would not return because when you hit the brake, you're pushing the fluid through the lines, which pushes this piston out, which in turn pushes the pads together, and that's returned back in. So I don't think that was happening before. Okay, so here's one of the guides here. There's 3 other here. And I'm just gonna, there's 1, 2, and then in the back there's 2. So I'm gonna go ahead, and this tab is gonna be on the front side. If you did do it the other way, it's gonna rub against the rotor, so you just kind of get it in the back first, pop it down. So that one's done. Then we'll move into the top here. Now, I had lost one of these on my Jeep, and I've got to actually get some more, but it doesn't bother me too much. So we'll go ahead and get the back side in. Sometimes they can be tricky. There we go. And then one final one. I just had to bend. For some reason these are bent more than they're supposed to be. So I'm just kind of using the rotor to push them up a little bit so that they'll clip in there properly. Okay, that one's up there. So now I'm going to get my pads, and I like to put a little something on here. You don't want to get too crazy because you're by the rotor. But I think a little bit of brake grease, just a tiny bit, maybe with a Q-tip, just to lubricate it so that the pads can slide freely. Alright, so we have the pads here, and they're still in good shape. These were replaced on here probably 6 months ago when I had done the hub here. So they're in good shape. We're going to use them. So there is, on this pad, you have this warning kind of tab on here. And what happens is when the pads wear down past that point, this will start rubbing against your rotor. That's that annoying sound you hear, the squealing sound, which is supposed to annoy you enough to where you'll get your brakes fixed. This has plenty of pad left. This one's going to go on the front. So sometimes it's a little tricky at first getting it in there. So there's our front pad there, and it was moving good in those slots, no problem. And then I'm going to put the back one on. There we go. The back one's on. And now we should be able to just bring this caliper up that way and then put the bolt back in the top. Like so. Sometimes I like to use the never sees on these, but you don't want to get crazy because this is an area where you don't want things to be coming loose on you. But I will put a tiny bit, very tiny, on it, and I'll tighten these down, and that'll conclude the caliper installation and the mounting of it. And then our next step is going to be the hose, where this is going to connect here, and then this is going to connect up on the upper half of the fender, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes. So stick around, saving you some money, showing you how to put a caliper in, a Jeep Liberty 2004, and replacing the rubber brake line hose. So let's get to it. Okay, the important part here is that this slides like that. That's exactly what a caliper is supposed to do. It's doing that. Of course, that's activated by the hydraulic pressure of the brake fluid once we hook the line up, but that's functioning good. Everything's tight. We have our two mounting bolts and the bracket is tightened. So I think next we're going to focus on disconnecting the old brake line hose. Okay, so the next thing I'm focused on is this 10mm bolt up here, and you can see from the new one what the new one looks like. You have this block where the line runs out of, and now on the opposite side of here under the hood is the brake line fitting. So we're going to have to remove this bolt, and we will have enough room. If we pull this back, it will reveal the fitting on the opposite side. There's enough play there where you don't have to do it under the hood. We can do it from right here. Sometimes separating this is going to be a little tough, but we got tools to pry it up. You know, I have a little pry bar. We're not worried about damaging this because we're removing it. But what we don't want to do is rip the line on the other side. So we're going to pull it forward enough to get wrenches in here, hold this block in place, unscrew the fitting, and ultimately that fitting will end up right in here. That's where the fitting on the opposite side goes into. So it takes a few minutes, so you're going to lose a little bit of fluid, but I have a drop pan below, and you know, the quicker you do it the better. And then we're going to loosen the bleeder and just do a gravity bleed while maintaining the level in the master cylinder. I did not have to do a complete bleeding of all the brakes because I did crimp this line. You don't want to let all the fluid run out of the cylinder. If you do that, you for certain have to go through each wheel and bleed each one of them. Okay, so I'm using the 10mm socket, which is a deep socket, and a couple extensions. Seems to work well. Gives me enough clearance to get that bolt out of it. And then I'll try to do the rest by hand. If I still can't get it, I'll have to go back to the ratchet, I guess. It's just the way it goes. We're almost there. Okay. Not a very big bolt. It's just enough to hold this block on there now. That is stubborn. You see, it's been fused to the body there. So we're going to have to give it a little crystal blue persuasion. So I do have a pry bar. We're just going to use this pry bar behind it and just give it a little turn. So you can see it came loose here. And we're going to pull it forward enough that we can access the fitting on the back. Now you can either use an open end wrench in there, a crescent wrench, anything that's not going to strip it, because that's pretty important. Might have to hold this back a little bit or go under the hood and maybe give it, I think I might do that, see if I can't get, because it seems a little tight here. I know that once I loosen this up here, the fitting, it's probably going to recede under the hood there. And I'm going to need to reattach it to this new one. So, yeah, let's see how we're going to approach that. We're getting closer to finishing the job, so let's get it done. Put on some vice grips here. Not anything too crazy, just enough to hold it still. And it's kind of lodged in between the springs, so it kind of gives it some stability. And I'm going to use some of this penetrating oil and just get to that brake connector behind it. And then we'll give it we'll give it 5-10 minutes. We'll come back to it with a wrench, see if we can't get that fitting off and get it into the new brake line here. Okay, so I have the line free. I'm holding it, the block with the vice grips, and I'm going down with the wrench. It's 3/8. When you do get it loose, just do an up and down kind of motion to make that fitting be clear of any rust in there. Because if you go digging at it and just you keep doing it, you could damage the line. So it's best to kind of work it back and forth first, and it'll be much easier. I did push the line from under the hood forward just a little. I didn't want to force it and break anything. I think there's enough room. Hopefully it won't, once it comes off, it won't escape into the hood area, but it won't be a big deal. I'll just have to put something in there to push it forward enough very quickly while the fluid's leaking, so I can attach it to the new block here. So let's go on with it. It's tough. Tough to get that wrench in there, but it's going to take quite a few turns to get this out of there. Sometimes I like to switch the wrench up at a certain point. Maybe switch it to the small crescent wrench. It is starting to leak here now. But I got a whole thing of fluid, so I'm not worried about it. As long as that master cylinder doesn't empty, you don't want that to happen. So it's good if you have someone else, have them manning the master cylinder there. We're getting there. This is one of them fittings that stays tight throughout the whole loosening process. Alright, so I've managed to get the old one off. Wasn't too bad. It's not leaking that much. If I had the master cylinder open, in other words the cap was off of it, it'd be flowing a lot more. There isn't much fluid here that's I've lost. So I'm going to continue to, I did start it by hand, and I'm going to continue to tighten it up with the wrench, and we'll proceed on to the next step. Okay, so we have it in there. As you can see here, we have it in there, the fitting. We didn't over tighten it. You don't want to over tighten it. Just nice and snug. I don't see any more leaking. I'm going to disengage the vice grips. We'll put the 10mm bolt here, mounting it back to the body, and continue. Okay, so I've loosened the bleeder here. Remove the cap from the master cylinder, and I can hear it starting to drip now since I removed the cap. And I have my brake fluid here handy, and I'm just going to keep an eye on the level and keep filling it up until I'm happy. I'd say you could let it drip for, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. It really depends. Look at it. You know, do you see any air bubbles in there? You want to make sure that cylinder is filled up. Okay, so I let it go for about 10 minutes. Then I tightened up the bleeder and just went in and pumped the brake a few times, just enough to extend that piston out. And then I'm going to loosen that again, and continue doing it for maybe another 15 minutes. Alright guys, so it's been going for about a half hour. I've been topping it off probably every 8 minutes or so. I did my final top off. You know, it'll be driven and tested, and if it needs additional bleeding anywhere, we'll take care of it. I've taken some white lithium grease very lightly and put it over the new the metal parts of the new hosing and the bleeder, because anyone who works on cars knows that the bleeders rust out, and it gets very hard to take them off several years from now, especially here in Buffalo with the snow and the salt. It just murders everything. But if you liked the video and it helped you with your 2004 Jeep Liberty or 2005 or whatever, you know, the brake systems are pretty much the same there. Like it, and if you could subscribe, it'd be great. Get the channel growing. I can do more. I know a lot of the viewers are not subscribers, and that's, you know, pretty much normal with YouTube. A lot of people just want to come and get the help, and that's great, but they don't subscribe. So if you could do that, it'll help out. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.